All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Tony Patelis, and this is the College Hoop News Podcast. This is our first episode of the year. We're very excited to be back. We're ready to go. I think we're just about 40 days now till the season starts. So we're right. Things are getting in full swing here. We're right around the corner. We're ready to talk some college basketball. Before we get started with tonight's episode, I just wanted to thank everybody who listened to the podcast last season. It was our first year. Some exciting stuff. We're just at about 100 subscribers, so that's very exciting. I appreciate everybody who listens to the podcast on a regular basis. Tonight we're going to get started with the ACC preview. So just like last year, we're going to do a few previews a week up until the season starts, and then we'll get back to our weekly Sunday night weekly recaps. Also have again some really cool coaching interviews this preseason. Hopefully get some media guys on this as well. So tonight I have a new guest on. It's his first time on the podcast. His name is Mychal Hunter. He's joining me tonight to talk some ACC basketball. Really great guy. I've gotten to know Mychal pretty well over the last few years now. We've connected because both of us love college basketball, but we also love dogs. So we love to talk about our dogs. So we basically talk about college basketball and our dogs usually. So Mychal, how are you tonight, man?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No problem. So just to get you familiar with Mychal, if you're not, he owns ACCBasketballReport.com. He also has his podcast, ACC Basketball Report. And you can find that on Podbean, correct, Mychal? Any other outlets for that?
I am on Podbean. It's on iTunes. It's on Stitcher. It is on, I believe I'm on Google Play. And I am working on getting myself on CLNS Media as well. So Stitcher, SoundCloud. I'm on most of the major outlets.
Awesome. And he also does some writing for Slap the Sign, which covers Notre Dame sports. And he also just started working for the Runner Sports on Twitter. So check out those. So let's get right into it tonight. We're going to talk some ACC hoops. Mychal's a very, very knowledgeable guy when it comes to ACC basketball, so that's why I'm having him on tonight. Mychal, are we again looking at the ACC probably as the best conference in college basketball this year?
I believe so. A lot of people, metrics and otherwise want to suggest that the Big 12 is consistently, the best conference lately. I think historically the ACC provides us with the best college basketball in the country, in my opinion. I'm a little bit biased just because I've been watching it since I was a little kid. I've paid attention to the ACC more than maybe some other conferences. The ACC is very popular in the Northeast where I'm from. I'm sure that West Coast people love the Pac-12, the Midwest people love the Big 12, and certainly down here in the South, the SEC is king. But I think as far as consistency year in, year out, the level at which the ACC teams recruit, when you have a conference that has Duke, Louisville, UNC, Virginia, and Syracuse, that's five of the best programs in the country. And I think year in and year out, the ACC is where the best basketball is at.
Absolutely. And I think the last few years, like you mentioned, I was going to talk about the Big 12 a little bit. You could definitely compare to the Big 12 to the ACC. I think they were really close. You could make a case for the Big 12. You could make a case for the ACC. I think matching them up this year, I think the ACC is a clearly better conference. I think the Big 12 is as good as it is. It has quite a few more question marks with some of their marquee teams. I think West Virginia could possibly take a step back this year. I think Texas Tech might take a slight step back. I don't see that in the ACC. I think you're going to get the same type of, elite level competition. So I think the ACC is going to be the best league. I've been a big Big 12 advocate the last few years, but I think the ACC clearly the better league right now. We could change our minds midway through the season, but I think right now the ACC is the best league. I completely agree with you. So let's get into some team previews. We're also going to do some picks and some fun stuff later on, but let's get into the nitty gritty here. We're just going to go in alphabetical order. I'm also going to share my rankings and Mychal's rankings on Twitter a little later on, so you guys can get the gist of where we feel teams are going to be finishing up. So tonight we're going to talk about Boston College first. I have them finishing at 12 this year. They're coming off a pretty successful season for BC standards of late. They finished 19-16. They won 7 ACC games. They got to the NIT. I think that overall, for the way the program has been going, I think that's pretty successful. First off, last year, Jim Christian, I think he was a little bit of a hot seat situation. Maybe not, one of these like big time hot seat situations, but I don't think many expected much from this team, and I thought they played pretty well. And I was also excited at the end of the year because with all the guys they had coming back, but then Jerome Robinson obviously goes off to the NBA. Deontay Hawkins decided not to take another year of eligibility. So I think they're kind of just right back where they started. So unfortunately, I think this might be a disappointing year, if that's what you want to call it. Hey, Kai Bowman is still one of the best players in the conference. Nick Popovich is a breakout guy, in my opinion. They got a few other pieces, Jordan Chapman, Stephon Mitchell. The cupboard isn't bare, but still, I think it's going to be a tough year for the Eagles. What do you think about the Eagles, Michael?
I'm right there with you. On my rankings, I have them as number 10. That has a little bit to do with a situation that some other programs are going through right now, more than I'm impressed by their roster. Replacing a guy like Jerome Robinson, 25 points per game in conference play last year, is obviously a tall order. They do have a very good kid coming in Jarius Hamilton, kid out of North Carolina, who's a top 60-ish recruit, who's probably going to start at the 3. I think Jordan Chapman will probably slide down to the 2. Last year they played a 3-guard lineup with Bowman, Chapman, and Robinson on the perimeter. I like Hamilton. I haven't seen a ton of him. I like his athleticism. I like his size. He's got a college-ready body. He's not one of these 6'8", rail-thin athletes. He's built. I think he's ready to step in and start. Bowman is Bowman. I mean, he's 17 points a game, yeah. 7 rebounds, 5 assists. He shoots it at 36% from deep. Jordan Chapman's one of the best catch-and-shoot guys in the conference. I think Stephon Mitchell, he's known as a great rebounder. He's not so much a great scorer, only 6 points a game last year, but I think he could take a step forward. Nick Popovich is a kid that does some nice things, but there has been somewhat of an exodus of quality big men from the ACC in the last year. There's no more Ben Lammers, there's no more Darrell Moore, there's no more Omer Yurtseven. So Nick Popovich really is one of the most effective returning big men in the conference. Now, obviously, defensively, Boston College under Jim Christian has never been great. I think this is a team that can score a lot of points. I think Kai Bowman is going to put up 20, 25 shots a night, and they're going to roll how he rolls. They've got some guys. This Winston Tabbs kid that comes in is strikingly similar to Robinson. He's a little bit smaller, but kind of the under the radar kid that is known as a shooter. He might be able to contribute if he can, pick a spot. He's not going to get more than 10, 12 minutes a game. But I think with Bowman and the attention that he's going to garner, I think that opens up the floor a little bit for guys like Chapman, maybe a guy like Stephon Mitchell to be more of a contributor. I like this team as maybe a bubble team, but ultimately I think it's an NIT team.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you a question. If Jerome Robinson returned, how good do you think this club could have been?
Oh, I would say probably somewhere in the 4 to 7 seed range in the NCAA tournament.
Wow, that good, huh?
This team last year was one of my favorite teams to watch, and I think that if Robinson comes back this year with Bowman, you have Robinson, Bowman, and Chapman on the perimeter, and you have Mychal, Popovich, and even the Krajewicz kid. He showed a little bit sometimes. They got a little something out of John Carlos Reyes last year. In certain spots, he can't be on the floor for more than 5 to 7 minutes a game, but sometimes he would give them quality minutes. With Popovich, especially getting another year under his belt, I think this team could have been really good. Jim Christian can really coach offense, and I thought this team could have been really good. They would have been better than Clemson. I think they would have been better than Notre Dame. I think in the ACC they would have been up around 7-8, I think, if Robinson came back. I mean, kid scored 25 a game last year.
Oh, absolutely. Just a fantastic player, fantastic backcourt. And Bowman, I think, is if they can maybe surprise a little bit, I think he might be in the mix for the ACC Player of the Year.
Absolutely.
Somehow win a few extra games. I mean, I thought what they got last year, getting up to 19 wins and 7 wins in the ACC, was pretty impressive. And it wasn't looking good the last couple of years under Jim Christian. So for them to get to the NIT and get a postseason bid, I thought was pretty impressive. And I kind of pegged Mychal and Popovich as the two guys that if they can step up their games this year, then they could probably compete in that same type of range they were last year.
I think so. I think Mychal needs to provide more on the offensive end. I mean,
yeah.
But somebody's going to have to fill that 25 points per game that is left behind from Robinson. Hamilton's not going to be that guy. Bowman might push it up to 20. Chapman might get it up to 15 or 16. But that's a large hole to be filled. And I think Mychal is probably the guy that needs to step up and get up around 11, 12 points a game to try to mitigate some of that loss.
Yeah. Hopefully some more fans can show up because I kind of compare a BC game to a funeral procession. They play about 30 minutes from where I live, and I usually catch at least a handful of games a year, and it is just so bad and so just a dreck. There's just nobody shows up. It's just so quiet. It's pretty disappointing because 10 years ago BC had a pretty exciting program. They were in that top 10 a few years, and with guys like Sean Marshall and those guys were around. So it was exciting. They should have never fired Al Skinner. Never.
I absolutely agree. The Jared Dudley, Craig Smith, Sean Marshall years they weren't necessarily fun to watch, but, you can't argue with the results.
No, not at all. I just that still is one of those firings that I still shake my head at. So, all right, so let's move on here. We're going to talk about Clemson next. And let me just say, having Mychal on the podcast, I'm really excited because he's really into recruiting and prospects and stuff like that. Guys coming into college basketball this year. As many of you know, I don't follow much recruiting. I'm trying to get into it more. But to have him on the podcast is great because he knows all these young kids that are coming into the conference this year. So let's talk about Clemson real quick. So I think outside of Ohio State, Clemson to me was the biggest surprise in college basketball. I didn't expect much from them at all. I thought they'd be another middle of the pack or maybe even lower ACC team. Brad Brownell certainly saved his job last year. The Tigers had a fantastic season. They finished tied for third in the league. They got to the Sweet 16. They won 25 games. And this year, I think I'm a little higher on Clemson than you are, Mychal, but they do return a good chunk of production. Marquise Reed and Shelton Mitchell, I think, is one of the better backcourts in the conference. Elijah Thomas is a kid that I've talked about a lot. I think he's pretty underrated up in their front court. I was really surprised how well they played without once Dante Grantham went down with that injury. I thought that was going to be a huge loss, and they didn't really skip a beat. I thought Amir Sims is a kid who stepped in and played well. So they have a newcomer coming in, too, that I think is going to help in that front court, and Javon White. He averaged almost a double-double at Oral Roberts. So I'm excited about this team again. I think they're a top 25 team heading into the season. What do you think about the Tigers?
I'm right there with you. My concern with Clemson is, even coming into last year, I knew they were talented. I think everybody knew they were talented. Okay, Grantham was highly regarded coming out of high school. Gabe DeVoe was a kid coming out of North Carolina, was just an offensive juggernaut. That was his reputation coming out of high school, and he had never really lived up to that reputation. This year, the biggest drawback is Brad Brownell. I have never really been sold on Brownell. I agree with you. He saved his job last year. But what I worry about Brownell is, he brought in Marquise Reed, who was a transfer from Robert Morris. He brought in Shelton Mitchell, who was a transfer from Vanderbilt. He brought in Elijah Thomas, who was a transfer from Texas A&M. All these guys are going to be gone next year. Okay. They struck out on Zion, which that wouldn't help him next year anyway because he's a one and done. They struck out on Trey McGowan's. They just struck out on Josiah James, who decided they go to Tennessee instead next year, and he just signed a contract extension. So I'm wondering what the fall off is going to be. Now they've got a kid coming in this year that I really like that made my top freshman 15, and Hunter Tyson. He's a 4-star kid. He's 6'7", about 200 pounds, left-handed, pretty silky smooth, plays the small forward. He's a kid that I really like. I'm not sure. It's easy to like kids on YouTube because they make 100% of the shots on YouTube. So, unless you see a kid play in person, it's difficult. I like Clemson a lot this year. I agree with you. I think that backcourt, I don't think it's blasphemous to say that that's the best backcourt in the conference. I love Marquise Reed on the offensive end. He does a little bit of everything. I think he's one of the best perimeter defenders in the entire conference. Shelton Mitchell is basically the definition of steady. And then Elijah Thomas is a guy that could potentially average double-double and win the Defensive Player of the Year award in the conference. Amir Sims, he was a glue guy last year. This year, they're going to have to lean on him a little bit more. For even all the minutes that he picked up when Grantham left, he still only averaged 4 points and 3 rebounds last year. So, Gabe DeVoe is gone. All that three-point shooting is gone that he provided last year. 14 points, 5 rebounds, a couple of assists a game. I'm just wondering, this year I think they're fine. I worry about the years after. I do like the white kid. I do like the
white kid.
the Javon White kid. I think he provides them with some quality depth. I do have concerns with when kids transfer up. So, there's a lot of guys coming into the ACC this year that are coming from the Sun Belt and the ASUN and everywhere else. Transferring up is when I get a little concerned. I think it's kind of a crapshoot, and I never really know what to expect. But I think he provides them with some good quality depth. I like the Hunter Tyson kid. I think Clemson's going to be fine this year. I have them at number 8 in the conference.
Yeah, they were one of the best defensive teams in the conference last year. I think they finished 3rd. And you mentioned Amir Sims. Yes, he didn't put up great production, but once Grantham got down and he got some more minutes, I think he averaged 6 points and 6 rebounds a game once Grantham went out with the knee injury. So there was a little bit more production. I don't think he'll ever be a huge offensive guy, but he's good. He's good on the glass, and I like his versatility. So offensively, how do you compare this team to last year's team? Do you think they'll be better or worse? How do you feel they'll be on that end of the floor?
Offensively, they're last year they're 74 points a game, which was about 170 in the country. I think, if you didn't watch the games, which you and I both know that a lot of people like to read the box score and then form an opinion. Gabe DeVoe it can't be overstated how huge he was for Clemson after the Grantham injury. The guy shot lights out all conference season. It was absolutely insane to watch him shoot the ball. And they don't have that shooter this year. Now, Marquise Reed can shoot the ball. Shelton Mitchell can shoot the ball. But I don't know if either one of them can shoot the ball with the same consistency, the same clutch timing that DeVoe did last year. I think they're going to take a step back offensively.
Okay.
I like Sims. I like Tyson, but Tyson's a young kid. Sims has never really, been in the spotlight. One kid that I do like, and he's a freshman last year, and if you didn't watch the games, you'd never know he existed. He's a 6'4" freshman guard last year named Clyde Trapp, who he only averaged 2 points a game last year, less than a rebound, less than an assist. The kid had a reputation of scoring. Now, he's not the most efficient guy in the world, but he is able to score the ball. And they have another freshman coming in this year named Johnny Newman III, who is also a pretty good scorer. He may be able to fill in some of that gap in the shooting on the perimeter. So those are two guys that may be able to step up and help mitigate that hole left by DeVoe.
Yeah. The one thing I do like about this team is in all their important spots, their experience. They're really, all those guys they're all seniors. So I'm an experienced guy. I'll take 5 seniors over 5 5-star freshmen any day of the week. I've always felt that way. So I like veteran clubs. I always will, go with them over some of the younger clubs with more talent. So I have Clemson at 7. And you're going to say, well, Tony, you just said that they're a top 25 team. I said, yeah, I got 7 ACC teams in my top 25. So I have them at 7. Where do you have them finishing?
I have them at 8. And I also want to throw in real quick, the return of David Scarra is huge because he was one of their best defensive players. Again, like you said, a senior, a guy who's been there, done it all. He's not going to do a lot on the offensive end, but leadership-wise, locker room-wise, and defensively, he's a big-time holdover from last year.
Do you think their depth will be better this year compared to last year's club? Just before we move on.
No. Tyson being a freshman, he's not going to play defense because freshmen don't play defense. Losing DeVoe is huge. Losing Mark Donnell is big. I think he provided some spots for them last year where he stepped up, played big, made a lot of big threes, some clutch threes. Again, gave them quality depth in the front court. He's gone. Obviously, Grantham is gone, but he didn't. they were fine without him after the fact last year, so I don't think that loss is going to be as detrimental. But I think when you replace seniors and quality guys like DeVoe, Grantham, and Donnell with freshmen that have never played in the ACC at this level, they're going to struggle initially. So it's going to be interesting. Clemson's one of the most interesting teams in this conference next year, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think they're going to be right in the mix. I think they're going to be back in the NCAA tournament, so
Absolutely.
should be exciting. All right, so up next, we're going to talk about Duke. Had a very successful year last year, 29 wins, lost in the Elite Eight to Kansas, but still not a bad run for the Blue Devils. So here's the thing. I don't really think there's that much to talk about with Duke. I mean, they're super talented, but you just talked about it with defense and freshmen. This is what I've thought about Duke all offseason. There's two things. Can they play defense and can they shoot the three? Those are the two things I'm most concerned about with this team. Obviously, you can't, argue the talent, as I said, but how good is this team and where do you have them finishing first off? Because that's what I want to know.
I have Duke finishing number 2 in the ACC.
Okay, I got them at 3, like I said. So what are you thinking about this team? What's your concerns? What do you like? Go ahead.
I think they can shoot. I think Cam Reddish is maybe, everybody talks about Barrett. I talk a lot about Nasir Little. Cam Reddish probably has the most upside of any freshman in the country this year. He has been known to be a little bit of a guy who doesn't play hard all the time. He's kind of lackadaisical sometimes. I watched him play in the Egypt under-19 team last year. At times, he looked like the best player in the tournament, and at times you'd never even know he was on the court. Now, the one thing he can do is he can shoot he can shoot the hell out of the ball. 6'7", plays on the wing. He's super athletic. He's got a really nice looking stroke. He's going to be able to shoot the ball. Barrett, he's not a knockdown guy, but you got to respect him. I still am not buying into this whole Zion Williamson can shoot the three nonsense. You can go up and play kids in Canada, and some people may be impressed. I'm impressed with his athleticism. 285-pound guy shouldn't be able to move and do what he does. But as far as shooting the ball from deep, I'm not sold yet. Trey Jones, he can shoot it a little bit, but I think 34% is going to be his biggest deal. I think it's going to be interesting. The most interesting thing is whether or not Coach K goes back to that zone, because that zone was actually really effective last year. I think when they actually played zone, they were one of the best zone teams in the country last year. One kid that you want to keep an eye on is Alex O'Connell, who's a super athletic kid. I think at times you're going to see Jones, Barrett, Reddish, and O'Connell on the floor with Williamson playing the 5. And that's scary for other teams. It's got to be. But can they shoot consistently? I don't know. This isn't the Chris Carrawell, Shane Battier, Nate James teams that everybody could just stand in a corner and shoot the ball. I think Barrett's more of a mid-range guy, get into the bucket and finish guy. I haven't seen a whole lot of Trey Jones. I'm just going by, videos and people that have seen him, kind of secondhand knowledge. The shooting does worry me. I know Cam Reddish can shoot it. I don't think Zion can shoot it. But again, I think we're kind of splitting hairs. Duke's going to be really good and really fun to watch if you're a Duke fan.
The only thing I've seen Zion Williamson do is dunk. That's all really you see on YouTube. You don't see much else than that. So I'm not super familiar with him. I've heard it all the stuff about him, but I
just
he
went up to Canada and made 3 out of his first 4 attempts from deep, and everyone's like, he's cured. Well, okay. I mean, if they had gone up and played, I can't remember the name of the college up there, and that bothers me. There's a college up there that's won like 11 straight national titles, and they offered to play Duke when Duke came to Canada, and Duke said thanks, but no thanks. And they played some of these other teams. Carleton, that's the name of the
Carleton,
program.
right? I was just going to say that.
And thanks, but no thanks. If Duke had played them and Zion put up the numbers that he put up against those other teams against Carleton, I would be impressed, and I'd buy in a little bit more than I am right now. But as of right now, I'm not completely sold.
Have you given up on Marcus Bolden yet?
Yes, I think Javin DeLaurier is a better player.
Okay. Yeah, I think people have been waiting for Bolden to kind of turn a corner, and I just don't see it happening. I think he's just going to be another semi-decent role player for this team this year.
And I don't think we're alone in that. I honestly think that Coach K may be moving on from him as well. I think, you're going to see a lot of Vrankovic this year. I think you're going to see a lot of Delorier. I mean, Bolden. I think Bolden had a game up in Canada against these Canadian teams. He played like 7 minutes, didn't attempt a shot, and had 1 rebound, something like that.
Now,
I don't know.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish your.
No, I don't know what to expect from the kid anymore.
Yeah, me too. Now, what about, before we move on, what about at the point guard spot? Who do you see getting? Is it going to be Trey Jones, or what's going to happen there?
I think it's going to be Trey Jones. It's going to be his job to take and run with, I think. Now, at the under-19 games in Egypt for Team Canada, Barrett played a lot of point guard for that team, so he has that capability. I don't know if Jones plays off the ball a whole lot. Right now, I expect Trey Jones to be the point guard and Barrett to maybe play with him, I guess, up top. It'll be interesting to see. I think Trey Jones is potentially upside-wise one of the best players in the conference, certainly one of the best freshmen in the conference. But it's always interesting to see how these high-profile guys mesh together when they get to college.
Absolutely, yeah, because there's only so many shots that go around, so we'll see if anybody has trouble with that. But all right, so let's move on here. We're going to talk about Florida State next. Florida State, wow, what a run in the NCAA tournament. They got to the Elite Eight. I think they were an 8 or 9 seed. I can't remember. One of those 8 or 9 seeds. So they're coming off one of their most successful seasons since they made the Elite Eight run back in 2011. When I think they lost to VCU that year. I think that was the year VCU. I'm sorry, they lost in the Sweet 16 to VCU. They beat some really good teams to get to the Elite Eight this year too. They didn't have an easy run. They beat Missouri, they beat Xavier, they beat Gonzaga. So that was a really impressive run. I think they have a really good shot to be pretty good again. The thing I love about Leonard Hannibal teams is their depth, their versatility. They always seem to play so many guys. They have so many things they can do lineup wise. They're just so deep, and I'm a big depth guy. So the point guard spot is definitely a question mark. The more I think about it, I think Trent Forrest is the guy. I think he's going to get the job, and he'll do a pretty good job. The other questions is is MJ Walker going to turn that corner this year? He was one of those 5-star guys last year that really didn't play well. He got lost in the shuffle. So what do you think about Florida State this year? I have them finishing 5th. What do you think about the Noles?
I personally have them finishing 6th. I tried not to get into the, let's call it, recency bias with that tournament run, because coming up to the tournament, they did not look good the last couple weeks of the season. I like this team quite a bit. Again, I have them at 6. I agree with you that Trent Forrest is going to be a better player for them at the point guard position than CJ Walker was. I actually had Walker as one of my breakout candidates last year, and he became a turnover machine. It was unbelievable to watch. But I really like Forrest. He turned it on late in the year and looked really good. Walker was so good at times, and you could see the potential. And then other times you'd never even know he was on the court. So I like him as a bust-out guy this year. He made my top 25 returning players in the ACC list. And again, they're incredibly deep. They lost Angola, they lost CJ Walker, which may have been addition by subtraction, and they lost Obiagu who transferred to Seton Hall. But the Kabengele kid is really good. Christ Kamaji is really good. They have another kid who didn't play a whole lot last year named Wyatt Wilkes, who is a 6'8" forward who barely saw the floor last year. The kid is definitely a player. They have another forward who redshirted last year named Raekwon Gray, who has – or is it Raekwon? I believe it's Raekwon.
It is Raekwon Gray. I had him pegged. I wanted to ask him about I wanted to ask you about him to see if he was going to make any impact this year, in your opinion.
I think so. I've only seen him play a few times. I watched him play, I think, in their exhibition game last year. And he's got, he's a 6'7" kid, big-bodied kid. He's got the old man at the YMCA type game. He's not overly quick, but he can rebound. He can step out and shoot it from deep a little bit. He's a kid that he could be a a deep, deep sleeper. I'm not going to say that he's going to win ACC Player of the Year, but he may have a few spots in the season where people say, who the hell is this guy? And he's going to help Florida State win some games. I am really high on Terrence Mann. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the conference. 13, 5, and 3 a game last year. MJ Walker, I think, could potentially be one of the best players in the conference if he puts it all together. I think last year that team was the sum is better than its parts type team. This year, I think this team is kind of like a big three situation with Kofor, Mann, and Walker, and Forrest running the show. So
yeah, the Kofor waiver situation was huge. Getting him back, a veteran guy who he finally put it together last year. I felt really good for him having a breakout season because I always liked his game. I always was I was kept waiting and waiting for him to turn the corner, and he finally did last year. So that was nice to see. And you made a great point, and I think people are kind of doing this with Syracuse as well, where we put way too much stock in the NCAA tournament run. Sometimes we've talked about this before, where you win 2 games in the tournament, but you were a 10 seed, and all of a sudden you're a top 25 team. I mean, some people have to step back and kind of say, okay, let's look at the roster. Let's see if this is really.
Let me ask you, as a guy who loves the Zags, does this Florida State team beat Gonzaga if Tilly plays? I mean,
I think it's a good possibility. I think possibly. I still think they could have beat him. Yeah.
Yeah, I just Tilly. I think he got ruled out 10 minutes before the game started, something like that.
Yeah.
I think that was just a huge blow to Gonzaga. I don't see Florida State coming out and beating them. If he played, especially with as hot as he had been going into that game. It's just, hey, I'm splitting hairs. Up to that point, they'd still won 2 games in the tournament. But going back to just before the tournament, they looked terrible going into the tournament. I think they were one of the last teams in. So I tried to stay away from, like you said, the hype machine. They need to get better defensively. That's one thing for sure.
Florida State matched up really well with Gonzaga, though, I thought.
Yeah.
Gonzaga had a lot of bigs, and I think Florida State can, like I said, can do so many different things lineup wise. So another kid that you didn't mention is David Nichols, is the Albany grad transfer. He's going to see some time. He's a really, really talented kid. Averaged 15 a game last year. Again, he's transferring up, so we have to be concerned about that a little bit. But he's a really talented kid. He rebounds well as a guard. He can distribute. He'll probably see some time. He can play both guard spots, so I think that just gives Florida State more versatility.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I didn't have him in my notes right here, but I haven't seen a whole lot of him. I know that he destroys UMaine every time they played each other in the America East. And at one point in time, I attended a UMaine, so I kind of followed them a little bit. But I knew him from the America East. I was kind of a box score guy for the America East. I'm not going to sit down and watch an America East game unless it's Albany and Vermont. But yeah, Nichols is a kid that he could step in and be that point guard that they need. He is more of a scoring point guard, which I think this team doesn't really need. I think they need a guy that's going to get Terrence Mann, Phil Kofor, MJ Walker in positions to succeed and positions to hit open shots.
Yeah, well, the one thing, I mean, as much as I like Trent Forrest as well, he was an abominable, terrible perimeter shooter last year. He's not really an efficiency guy on the offensive end, but he rebounds, he distributes, he does a lot of good things. So let's see if he can kind of improve this year on the offensive end. So let's move on here. Next is your team, Georgia Tech. Michael's a big Georgia Tech guy. Coming off a pretty dismal year, 13-19 record, 6-12 in the ACC. So the guys, how much trouble is this program in? How much trouble is this year's team in? I love Jose Alvarado. I think he's fantastic. I think he's going to be one of the better players in the conference. But outside of that, I just don't see much. And so who should we watch? Who should we be watching out for this year? Can they win a few ball games? Talk about the Yellow Jackets.
Yeah. As far as how much trouble this program's in, the program itself has never been, in the Kremens era. Sure, Bobby did, tremendous work. He had that New York pipeline. Those were the glory days of Georgia Tech basketball. the biggest thing with G Tech, and people are going to say it's nonsense, but is the academic standards that they have really impacts its recruiting. I don't believe any other school in the ACC requires you to take 3 years of calculus, and that is a requirement at Georgia Tech. These blue chip kids don't want to take 3 years of calculus. As far as Passner goes, I wrote an article for the Runner a couple weeks ago that his future at Georgia Tech in Atlanta depends on this 2019 class that he's working on. He's got some big fish on the hook. He just needs to get them in the boat, and we're holding on to see if he's actually able to do that. As far as this year's team, Alvarado is he's the alpha. He's the guy. He's a gritty kid out of New York that I love. He became one of my favorite G Tech point guards of all time after about 15 minutes a game last year. They lose Okogie, they lose Lammers, they lose Tadrick Jackson. That is about 41 points, 42 or 3 points off a team that scored 66 a game last year. So it's not going to be good. It's not going to be pretty this year. As far as kids that can play, I think the kid that you want to look out for is obviously Mike DeVoe, who's a top 60 kid. Of course, because this is Georgia Tech, he's in a walking boot right now because he's got a injury to his right toe, or a toe on his right foot. So according to a source I have that I've been in contact with, he's not expected to miss any games. So that's a good thing. The only other player that I would hype up with any confidence right now is Curtis Haywood II. He's a kid at Oklahoma, went to Brewster Academy, was really starting to put it together last year before he had a stress reaction in his leg that was the kind of injury that if he would have continued to play on it, he would have suffered an injury like Kevin Ware from Louisville a few years ago, or Paul George. He had a steel rod put in. He's back. According to everybody I've talked to, he looks great. This is a kid that has perfect shooting form. I expect him to be – he has to be huge, and if Georgia Tech is to win 4 games in conference this year. I got my guys at 14 in the conference, and it's going to be a bad year in Atlanta. Fans that came back for the 2016 season are probably going to walk back out during the 2018 season. But I think Passner has them headed in the right direction. He works the social media. He works the community. He does all the things that basically Brian Gregory and Paul Hewitt don't do. He's not in any trouble because they're still paying both Brian Gregory and Paul Hewitt. So he's got till 2021 to get this turned around, I believe.
Yeah, I asked you the other day, is Passner in any trouble? And then you told me that he's going to get he's going to get a few more years. So we'll see what happens. I unfortunately have them finishing 15th. I've actually felt bad when I started to do research on Georgia Tech. There just wasn't much research. It was right. Okay, they have Jose Alvarado, and I don't know anybody else.
That's right.
So it's unfortunate, but hey, if he can get that 2019 class in order, you never know, they could be back up in the mix. I think 2 years ago, they surprised. They had that great season. They didn't get in the NCAA tournament, but they won a lot of games. I think they had a few upsets that year, kind of got the program back on track. But, did they play over their heads 2 years ago?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Josh Okogie comes in as a freshman, as a 3-star kid who is known as a high motor guy. And he comes in and he scores 16 a game his freshman year and puts up, no exaggeration, Kenny Anderson type numbers.
Right.
As a freshman, nobody expected that. When he came to the program, nobody expected that he would leave after his sophomore year and be the 20th pick in the draft. So, I think, Passner, he captured Atlanta with that season. And it was a really fun season. I mean, even though they didn't, that's how long we have suffered as Georgia Tech fans, is that they go to the NIT and the message boards are blowing up and Twitter is blowing up and everybody's losing their mind. It was a really fun time to be a G Tech fan. They upset North Carolina on New Year's Day, and that was the famous Rothstein. Picked them to go winless in the ACC, and they go out and they beat a top 10 North Carolina team on the first game of the ACC slate. So it was a fun season. Unfortunately, right now we're back in rebuild mode.
Yeah, that's pretty disappointing. But hey, we'll see what happens. You never know. They surprised 2 years ago. Maybe they can win a few extra games this year. All right, so let's move on here. Louisville's up next. 22-14 last year. 9-9 in conference. They did win a few games in the NIT. Obviously, they had the big situation with Rick Pitino getting fired, so the Rick Pitino era is officially over. The cheating finally caught up to old Rick. He's been doing it for a long time, and he still claims that he's innocent, which I think is hilarious. But they're starting over here, Mychal, and I think they got a fantastic coach in Chris Mack. He's been cleaning up on the recruiting trail just the last few weeks here. He's been piling up kids for next year's class. While I think the future's bright, I don't see this team making too much noise in conference. You never know because Mack is such a good coach. VJ King's a guy that, he just hasn't reached his potential yet. Maybe is this the year? I know you think Jordan Nwora is the best player in the world. So if he can be a breakout candidate, if Quan 4 transfer, Christian Cunningham's in, if they're two solid additions, so maybe they can make a little bit of a noise. But I'm just not very excited about this team this year. I have them finishing 10th. What do you think about the Cardinals?
Yeah, I've got them even lower. I've got them at 12. I just this roster, and it's the two guys that you mentioned. Okay, this is another team that last year at 22-14, 9-9 in conference, if you watched them play, they just didn't impress me. Okay, now Quentin Snyder's gone, Ray Spalding's gone, Deng Adele's gone, Anas Mahmoud is gone. That's four incredibly reliable guys that they had last year. Maybe their four most reliable guys. Lance Thomas would have gotten a shot to play this year. He transferred to Memphis. So you're basically left with Darius Perry, who is a good defensive point guard, but hasn't shown me anything on the offensive end. Ryan McMahon is a kid that you can stick in the short corner and he can drill some threes. But otherwise, you're looking at Jordan Nwora and VJ King as guys who are going to have to both break out and be consistent and carry the water, because these guys didn't bring in Louisville didn't bring in any freshmen this year, as far as guys who can, blue chip guys like they normally do. They brought in Okoye Gayu. They brought in Stephen Enoch. Big guys that are bodies. Okay, not impact scorers, not guys that none of these guys that are coming in are going to be Deng Adele. Nobody's going to, Quan 4 is not Quentin Snyder. So, VJ King, typically you see the development take place between the freshman and sophomore seasons, and they show up and they're really good. He's really good in the mid-range game. I think he's got one of the best mid-range jumpers in the conference. Unfortunately, the mid-range game has kind of disappeared from modern-day basketball. So he's got to actually work on extending out to the perimeter, taking good threes and being able to make them, such as Jordan Nwora. Jordan Nwora, like you said, is a guy I'm high on. He was number 19 on my top returning players list for this year. 6'8" forward who can stroke it, kid out of New York. 5.5, 6 points per game. He played 12 minutes per game last year. So his per 40 is actually 19 points and 7 rebounds per game. And the way that Mack uses those hybrid type wings, such as Trevon Blewett at Xavier, I think Nwora is a good candidate for a serious breakout this year. Yeah. That said, I'm not sure that it'll be enough to make Louisville a tournament team or even an NIT team.
Yeah, well, he's going to get the opportunities this year. Last year with all those guys that they had, he didn't really get the minutes he needed, but this year he's definitely going to get it. Okoye Gayu is one of the more funny transfer stories. He started at Louisville, then he transferred to, I believe, Georgetown. Then he transferred to SMU, and now he's back at Louisville.
That's right. That's right.
Which I find hilarious. I mean, how many times do you have to transfer, for God's sakes?
Yeah, there was a kid at UCLA a couple years ago, Mike Mosier, who went from UCLA to UNLV to Oregon, and he's a really good player. It was just crazy to see somebody actually transfer around the West Coast like that.
Yeah, but I definitely think Louisville fans have a reason to be excited. Chris Mack, like I said, fantastic coach. The 2019 class looks excellent. I'm sure you know that with all the recruiting research you do. So I think next year's team, if Jordan Nwora turns into the player we think, VJ King's going to be a senior, I believe, next year. So if he can finally figure things out this year, they can be pretty darn good in 2019-20.
Yeah, I agree. I think Malik Williams is another kid that needs to to produce for them. He's kind of he's a center, but he can shoot the three a little bit too. He needs to be a rim protector. He needs to slide into that Mahmoud slot that's open. And, with guys like Samuel Williamson that are coming in next year, Jalen Withers, Josh Nickelberry is a kid I'm really high on. I did hear that the Slazinski kid's going to actually redshirt next year, so he'll actually be part of the 1920 team, or I'm sorry, the 2021 team. But Louisville's going to be back next year. They, sometimes the greatest thing you can do in the offseason is hiring the best available coach in the country. So he turns Xavier into a power, and now he has, the full force of the Louisville program behind him. Chris Mack's going to kill it. He's going to be a Hall of Famer by the time it's all over.
Have you been reading Rick Pitino's tweets?
Absolutely not. I read the first probably half dozen or so. The second that he tweeted, I think he tweeted out a cereal box with that said like Pit Weedos or something on it. I think I shut it down. So
he's been traveling around talking to teams, to his friends' teams. I think he was at Syracuse a couple days ago. Is that the guy you would want your team to like really, like seriously, like don't get me wrong, he's a tremendous basketball coach. He's had a great career, but he just got fired. He's been doing dirt for years, and you bring him in to talk to your basketball team. I just find that hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, he'd probably tell you where the best looking waitresses are.
Right.
But you got to think about who you're talking about. So you're talking about Jim Boeheim. Jim Boeheim does not care what you or I think. He's got to do whatever the hell he wants. So, if Pitino's his buddy, then he's going to have they're going to go to lunch and he's going to talk to his team. There's nothing that you can't deny the fact that Pitino's one of maybe the greatest coaches of our time. So there's certainly information to be had there. There's certainly some learning experiences that can be, taken from Pitino. But at the same time, he's such a scumbag that, but like I said, Boeheim's going to do whatever the hell he wants.
Yeah. And he ruined the Celtics, so that's what pisses me off.
That's true too, yes, sir. Yeah.
Absolutely ruined the Celtics. All right, so let's move on here. We're going to talk about Miami next. 22-10 last year, 11-7 in the conference. They lost on a buzzer beater to Loyola in the first round. Really heartbreaking loss, but another successful year for Jim Larrañaga and the Hurricanes. He's really turned that program into one of the more consistent programs in the ACC, and not just the ACC, but the country. Now I think Miami certainly is capable of getting back to the NCAA tournament this year, but I think they need a lot of things to happen. DeJuan Huell is really the guy that I feel like is the solid returner. You know what you're going to get from him. You know what he's going to give you. So here's the thing. If Chris Leaks has a breakout year, that's great. If Anthony Lawrence has a breakout year, if Dejan Vasiljevic, I think that's how you say his name, if they all step their games up this year, I think you're going to see Miami in the NCAA tournament discussion. If not, they could be, a pretty below average club. So we'll see what happens. What do you think about the Hurricanes?
I'm right there with you. This is the team that honestly I have no idea what to expect. Larrañaga is going to run pick and roll. Chris Likes is probably going to be awesome in the pick and roll. They have a guy in Anthony Lawrence who, I actually talked a lot about Miami this morning. They are my number 11 team in the ACC. They could finish 11th. They could finish 7th. I honestly don't know. Likes is a kid that I'm really high on. At the same time, he's 5'7". Their transfer from Florida Gulf Coast, Zach Johnson, is 6'2". He's going to play the off guard position. That's a really small backcourt in the ACC, especially when you're asking these guys to guard guys like Kobe White at North Carolina. You're asking them to guard RJ Barrett at Duke, Tyus Battle at Syracuse, who's a big guard. I wonder how they're going to be defensively, especially up front. And then the other thing is consistency. Anthony Lawrence has been incredibly inconsistent over his entire career. Last year he had double digits in 15 games, and he had 5 points or less in 13 games. Right. So you never really know what you're going to get when he steps on the court. The anchor is obviously, like you said, DeJuan Huell. He's one of the best big men in the conference. 11 and a half points, 7 rebounds a game. If they put him in pick and roll situations with Likes and he dives to the basket, he's going to finish over anybody in the conference. So when they utilized Huell last year, They were incredibly successful, but sometimes they forget that he's out there and they just start jacking threes. So I think there's more questions than answers with this team, and that's why I got him at 11.
Yeah, me too. I have him at 11 as well. And, I was going to say to you, I've been a big advocate of Anthony Lawrence. I've always liked his game, but I keep waiting and waiting and waiting. And I'm like, okay, this is the year. He's like last year, I thought, okay, he's going to go out. He's going to average 12 points a game, 7 rebounds. He's going to be one of the better players in the conference. And like you said, just very much inconsistent. He's a pretty good rebounder. He averaged 6.5, so he's pretty good on the glass. But I just see so much more in him. I think he can be an impact guy in this league, and maybe it'll be this year. Maybe I'm, thinking too much of him, but we'll see what happens. Zach Johnson's a kid, though, that I think you're going to be. I know you don't, watch a ton of mid-major ball, but he's a talented kid. He's an excellent scorer. So I think him coming in is going to really help with the loss of a guy like Lonnie Walker offensively, and certainly Bruce Brown as well. So Jim Larrañaga is a really good coach.
Absolutely. Yep.
He's one of the best coaches in college basketball. I wouldn't be even, crazy to say that he's a top 10 guy, top 15 guy. In my opinion, I think he's done a great job with that program. So if they surprise, I wouldn't be shocked. But like you said, they're one of the more they're one of the teams like on my wait and see list. Like I got to see this team play a little bit, then I can give you a better example of what I think they'll be. So Miami, we both have them at 11, so I think we're right on par together here. So all right, so let's move on here. We're going to talk about up next. I think we went out of order here a little bit. But NC State is next. Now, I hate NC State. I hate everything about the program. I think they suck. I think Kevin Keith. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Michael thinks I hate this team. I don't know why. Probably because he thinks they're the best team in the country, and I don't. So last year, NC State, Kevin Keats comes in first year. First of all, I'll say this: Grand Slam hire. He did an excellent job at UNC Wilmington. They got into the NCAA tournament. They lost in the first round to Seton Hall, but they won 21 games. They did a great job in conference play. They had quite a few upsets, I think. So I think he showed immediately what type of coach he was. Like I said, I don't think a lot of people expected them to do much. They tied for third in the conference. They went to the NCAA tournament. Now, this year's group, I think, has plenty of talent. I think they're going to have another successful year. They do have some production to replace. Obviously, Al Freeman was a really good transfer for them from Baylor last year. They lost Omer Yurtseven. He's going to transfer to Georgetown, one of the better bigs in the conference. But they have some really intriguing newcomers. C.J. Bryce, really talented guard from UNC Wilmington. You have Devon Daniels, a Utah transfer. I really, really like him a lot. I think you're going to be excited about him, Michael, when you see him play. Wyatt Walker is a solid big from Sanford. And then Derek Funderburk. I've heard a lot of good things about him. He's a transfer from Iowa State. So I think they're going to be so good offensively. I think they have so many weapons. I think they're going to score a ton of points like they did last year. What do you think about NC State?
I am high on this team. I'm not quite as high as you think I am. But, Kevin Keats brought the Rick Pitino mindset to the ACC. And this run and gun stuff is incredibly fun to watch. I'm concerned a little bit. I am not high on Derek Funderburk at all. I saw him play at Ohio State. I think he's got the Antoine Walker-itis. He's a big guy who wants to go outside and shoot a little bit, and it's not really there for him. Devin Daniels, I have seen play. Is a kid that I am extremely excited about. He does everything on the court well. And to see him get out in the open court and be opposite wing of C.J. Bryce is something that I love. And I think that they may be the most talented perimeter team, or one of the most talented perimeter teams as far as shooting ability in the conference. Markel Johnson, Braxton Beverly, C.J. Bryce, Eric Lockett, Devin Daniels. I mean, all these guys can shoot the ball, and Markel Johnson is a point guard who's going to get them the ball in places where they can succeed. My question for them is, can they defend the post? When who on this team is going to take on Eli Thomas? Who is going to take on DeJuan Hughes? Who's going to take on Kerry Blackshear? If they can run constantly, cool. But they might end up being a Virginia Tech type team where they're not going to be able to defend. They're just going to have to outscore you. And those teams are always unpredictable. And losing Manny Bates to a shoulder injury for the season was a big blow, I believe. Ian Steer is not a kid who's going to defend these guys on the block. Wyatt Walker, I admittedly haven't seen a ton of outside of just YouTube videos. And, I worry about if they need a bucket, who do they dump it into on the block to get a bucket? Year 7 was really good last year. Leonard Freeman was just a monster last year who they could dump it into every now and then. And I wonder what their inside game is going to look like and how they are on their interior defense.
Yeah, I mean, they were the worst defensive team in the conference last year. As excited as we are about their explosive offense, they don't play much defense, then they're not a good rebounding team. And they're probably going to be a worse rebounding team this year because they don't have a big like you've been talking about. They're also a horrible free throw shooting team, which just pisses me off, as we know, because free throws are free. So they don't shoot free throws well. But again, if they can they don't have to be perfect on defense, but if they can just play some semblance of defense, I think they're going to be pretty exciting because, again, I think they're going to be better offensively this year. And they scored over 80 points a game last year. So, if they can score, get up to that 85 range, I think, they're going to be tough to stop.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And what's funny is I was never a big Al Freeman fan. I watched him when he was at Baylor. He was never anybody that really, I just didn't see it. But man, he was huge in some games last year. But when you add guys like Daniels, Bryce, Braxton Beverly is going to be better offensively. I really wish that he would be better defensively because he is absolutely atrocious on defense. But these guys their ability to shoot the ball. Eric Lockett he might be your 5th best guard. And that's incredible to me. So it's just, they're going to be another one of those teams that it's going to be Virginia Tech, Duke. These teams are all going to play small. The problem is there's only one ball on the court. And luckily enough for them, they have Markel Johnson, who is going to distribute the ball very effectively. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, Johnson is one of my favorite players in the conference. I think he's one of the most undervalued guys across college basketball. Mm-hmm. He only averaged 9 points a game last year, but what a great distributor he is. He's a pretty good rebounder for his size, so I think he's going to have a big year. But again, you got to play defense. You can't outscore everybody. They kind of remind me a little bit of Oklahoma last year, where they're going to score a ton, but they're going to give up a ton. That's just the way they are. So let's see if Kevin Keats can kind of get this team at least semi-decent on the defensive end and see how they do. Where do you have them finishing?
I got them at 7.
I have them at 8. And it just tells you the depth of doesn't that just tell you though the depth of the league, how good the league is? NC State, go ahead.
You have Clemson at 7, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I have Clemson at 8 and NC State at 7, so we just got them flip-flopped. See, I don't like them a whole lot more than you do.
Okay, well, at least I don't hate them.
That's and it's not just you. Every prognosticator and talking head out there doesn't have NC State in their top 25, so maybe it's me. It's entirely possible that it's me.
Mychal Hunter flooding Twitter with fake news about NC State.
That's right.
Unbelievable. All right, let's move on here to one of NC State's rivals, North Carolina. 26-11 last year, 11-7 in conference. They got knocked out of the tournament early last year in the second round. Texas A&M put a pretty big beat down on them. There's always a few teams during the offseason where at first I'm not all that high on. Then the more research I do, I say, wow, I was really wrong. I think North Carolina is one of those teams for me this year. I'm extremely excited about this team. I love, certainly you have to replace Barry. You got to replace one of the best, glue guys in college basketball, and Theo Pinson, who was one of my favorite players last year. I watched him, really experienced kid. But this group of Luke May, Cam Johnson, Kenny Williams, I really like this core. I really do. I think Kenny Williams really turned it on last year. You showed what type of player he is. You have some really intriguing young bigs, Sterling Manley, Garrison Brooks. Then you obviously have Nazir Little, who is just a freak of nature, one of the freshmen I'm most excited to watch this year. You can probably tell us a little bit more about him than me. So this team, again, I think is going to dominate on the glass like they always do. They have plenty of depth. Luke May is a legit national player of the year. I'm excited about this team. What do you think about the Tar Heels, Michael?
I'm higher on them than most. I have them winning the ACC outright this year. They're my number one team in the conference. Luke May is the best returning player in the conference, and as far as talent goes, he might be the fourth or fifth most talented guy on this roster. Kobe White is a kid that is more of a scoring point guard than North Carolina is typically used to. He's a big kid, 6'4", 6'5", plays incredibly fast. It's going to be interesting. I think it'll be a learning process for him with all these weapons around him. I mean, you come down the court, Kenny Williams and Cam Johnson stationed on the wing. Both of them shoot it at 40%. And then Nasir Little kind of roaming, Luke May kind of roaming. If Roy Williams commits to that 4-round 1 or 5-out offense again the entire season this year, the sky's the limit for this team. And then, against some other teams, if he wants to go two bigs, then he's got Brooks, Huffman, and Manley. Me in particular, I'm bigger on Brooks than the other two. But, if you want to go two bigs, you still have that quality depth in the front court, like you said. Little can play that athletic 4. He's a really good help side defender. He's going to slide over, probably block some shots on the help side. He can step out and shoot it a little. If you watch the McDonald's All-American game or the Jordan Classic, you saw what he can do. He made Zion Williamson look kind of silly a couple times defensively. He's a player that might only put up 12 and 6, but could potentially be the number 1 pick in the 2019 NBA draft.
I wanted to ask you about his offensive game. I know, like you said, he's a great defender, very versatile, kind of a freak type kid. But is he still learning on the offensive end? Is he an okay offensive player? What are his positives on the offensive end right now?
Like you said, he's a freak athlete. I started following him into his sophomore year. Basically, he was a top 100 kid who was a rim punisher, a help side shot blocker. He's kind of an athlete. And then, last summer when he was on the summer leagues, the EYBL or the Gauntlet or whatever, it would have been the Adidas Gauntlet because he played for one family. But on that circuit, he stepped out and all of a sudden he can shoot the ball and he can shoot the ball consistently. And I think that part of his game is still being developed, but he's already at a point where he's not a knockdown guy, but he's somebody that you need to respect when he's standing outside the arc.
Yeah. The thing about their front court too is like the guy like Manley, Huffman, Brooks. I don't think they have to be great for this team to be really good. I mean, they just have to stick on the glass, give them 7-8 points a night, and I think they'll be golden. I think they're going to be fine.
Yeah, and I mean, they don't have to score. Luke May can score. He's going to get 16 a game. Cam Johnson's going to get you 12. Kenny Williams is going to get you 10. Nasir is going to get you, a dozen. I took some grief from a UVA fan this morning on Twitter about having Cam Johnson ahead of Kyle Guy. I'm a big Cam Johnson fan. I think if you put Cam Johnson on half of the teams in the ACC, he's their best player. And on this team, he's a guy who can pick his spots. He's incredibly efficient. He rebounds the ball. He can handle the ball. And I'm a big Cam Johnson fan. And I think that he got lost in the shuffle a little bit because North Carolina has so much star power, I guess. Right. But
I don't think that's a crazy thing to say that Cam Johnson's better than Kyle Guy. I think Kyle Guy is pretty much a one-dimensional player. I mean, he's a really good scorer, but what else do you get from him?
Yeah, he was a better defender last year than he was his freshman year. Mm-hmm. But he's a knockdown shooter. He's one of the he's a shot maker, one of the best guys in the conference. But what else does he do? I said this morning on my podcast that if you took Kyle Guy off Virginia would still be pretty good. If you took either DeAndre Hunter or Ty Jerome off Virginia, I'd probably have some questions.
For sure. I have North Carolina at 2. Mm-hmm. I have them in the top 5 in my top 25, and I think they're going to be one of the best teams in the country. You have them winning the ACC, so Again, the more I look at this team, the more I like them. Do you think they'll be better defensively this year? Because they really weren't that good last year.
That's kind of the one drawback. I think Nasir gives them the potential to be really good defensively. I think Garrison Brooks he's kind of an undersized four, so I'm not sure how great he's going to be defensively. Sterling Manley has, I think, a lot of potential to be a good defensive big man. And if in the minutes that he gets, if they play two bigs, he can be very good defensively. But Kenny Williams, Cam Johnson, not the best defenders. Kobe White, if he wants to apply himself, could be a plus defender. He has that ability. He has that size. He has that length, and certainly the quicks to get out into the passing lanes and wreak some havoc. But, like we said before, freshmen don't typically play defense. So, I think, this team, they have the upside. They were 198th in the country in points per game against last year. So this may be a situation where they're leaning on freshmen more than seniors. They may actually be worse defensively, but they also have the firepower to outscore you if they need to.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on here. So we're going to talk about Notre Dame next, another team that Michael's very familiar with. As I said, he writes for Slap the Sign, which is a Notre Dame site, and follows the Irish very, very intently here. So looks to be kind of a turning of the guard this year. Disappointing season last year, a lot of injuries. Obviously, Bonzie Colson went down, and that really hurt this club. He was out for quite a bit of time. So looks to be kind of a turning of the guard here. Two program-defining players, Matt Farrell and Bonzie Colson, obviously graduated last year. So Mike Bray is probably going to be looking towards TJ Gibbs and Rex Pfluger to lead this group. Bray, to me, is a whiz, one of the best coaches in the game. Quite a few newcomers on this team. I'm going to kind of give you the floor on this club, because I think there's a lot of guys that are going to be newcomers that are going to be contributing quite a bit.
Yeah, like you said, Bray is. If you don't like Mike Bray, then something's wrong. I mean, the guy is he's fantastic, and his personality, his coaching chops, he's the whole package. I think he is a guy that he has a mantra of get old, stay old, and he had been effectively doing that for a long time. And this is kind of now it's in that cycle where it was a complete wash, and now he's got to bring in the new guys. And I'm not going to say rebuild, because I don't think this is a rebuild. This isn't a G-Tech situation. This isn't a Miami or a Boston College type situation. I think this team's still very good. I think this is a bubble team. I think TJ Gibbs, I had him at number 3 as far as returning players in the ACC this year. I think he's one of the best shooters in the conference. I think last year when Farrell and Colson got hurt, he stepped up and didn't miss a beat. Now, they weren't very successful and those players were gone, but Temple Gibbs played at a very high level. Rex Pfluger isn't a guy that's built to be a secondary offensive option. He's a glue guy type player. So when you're looking at some secondary guys, Nate Lazuski is the guy. His freshman this year, top 50 type player, 4 stars, 6'9", 200 pounds. He can shoot the hell out of the ball. He can shoot over people. He can shoot over the zone. When they went to the Bahamas recently, he had a very good tournament there. And another guy that I'm really high on is a kid named Prentice Hub, who was a top 70 guy, suffered a knee injury his senior year in high school and missed his entire senior year, or else I think he would have climbed the chart. He's a left-handed kid, pretty good size for a point guard at 6'3". I think if he can play the point guard position and Temple Gibbs can play off the ball, then Notre Dame can be successful. I think they have potential to be a bubble team.
Okay. Now, do we have any updates lately on DJ Harvey and his injury situation?
I saw he's going to be cleared, or not cleared, but he's going to be, I guess, given the ability to start practicing over the next couple of days, according to a story that I received in an email today from Tom Noy, or from a buddy who relayed it. It was posted by Tom Noy. They are still, to my knowledge, they're still testing it out. He did have microfracture surgery in the offseason, and that used to be, that type of injury used to be the kiss of death. That's what derailed Antonio McDyess. That's what ended Amari Stoudemire's career. I think if he came back it would be a lot to happen very quickly. I've been told that medical redshirt is still very much on the table. He's going to test it out. He's going to see how he feels, and then they're going to make a decision on it.
Yeah, that would be a big loss, I think, because I think he's really can come into his own this year if he's healthy. So hopefully he can get back on the court. Another thing that was somewhat disappointing was this Chris Doherty situation. He's a freshman, really talented kid. He actually grew up like 10 minutes from where I am up here in Massachusetts, and I guess he left the school. What's the situation with Doherty?
He left for a month and he is back, and that's all I really know. He is back with the program, and he will be a part of the program this season, is what I'm told.
Okay, and do you think he could possibly give them any production this year out of the gate?
He's going to get the opportunity, I think, because this team is, if you look at it, there's the potential to be good, but Prentice Hub, history of knee problems. DJ Harvey, history of knee problems. Juwan Durham, history of knee problems. The biggest concern I have with this team is their front court depth. Elijah Burns is kind of a bit player who's should only be on the court 10 minutes a night at the most. John Mooney is a stretch 4 guy. He's not going to bang down the block. And can Juwan Durham's knees hold up? This kid's had knee problems going back to his senior year in high school. Chris Doherty's going to have to be a body that can get in there and bang around with the DeJuan Hewells, Eli Thomas, Zion Williamson, as terrible as that might end up for him. But, he's going to have to play some minutes. And, especially if, God forbid, Juwan Durham goes down with another knee injury, Doherty may see himself coming into a lot of minutes very quickly.
I have the Irish at 9. I feel like that's a fair spot for them, with definitely a chance to creep up a few spots because I think Mike Bray is just a fantastic coach, as we said. Where do you have Notre Dame finishing?
I also have them at 9.
Where do you have Notre Dame finishing, Michael?
Oh, sorry. I lost you there for a second. I also have them at 9, yes.
Okay, that's a good spot. And you are very high on TJ Gibbs. Wow, number 3 in the conference. I think he's a very good player. I wouldn't put him that high. That's probably returning players. Excuse me. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's move on here. We're going to talk about Pitt next. Pitt is, Pitt made one of the worst coaching hires in history a few years ago. Kevin Stallings comes in. He's already gone after only 2 years. He's out the door. In walks Jeff Capel, hopefully to get the program back on track. Jamie Dixon had this program in such a great spot a handful of years ago before he left for TCU. Kevin Stallings, just a complete disaster. Now, this is a team certainly isn't close to competing in the ACC at a high level yet, obviously. But I think it's definitely a more talented team than last year's. Obviously has a long way to go. What do you think about the Panthers this year? Can they win a few more games than they did last year? That you think they're still going to be pretty below average?
Oh, I think 0-18 is on the table again. Wow. I actually don't. I don't think they're more talented than they were last year.
You don't? Okay.
No, I do like the Indeer kid, the transfer that came in for them at the point guard position. But I believe he's health has been an issue with him in the past. They have 0 front court depth. Terrell Brown is probably their best player in the front court, and he's still learning. I think he has potential to be a serviceable player in the ACC, but he's not there yet. Kene Chukwuka is a JUCO kid who didn't play a lot of minutes at the JUCO level, and now he is basically their starting center. So they're going to get beat up. They're going to get pounded in the block. Xavier Johnson, Trey McGowan's, Adiese Tony. These guys come in, 3-4 star guys. They're, I don't think McGowan's right now is as good as Marcus Carr. I don't think Tony is as good as Parker Stewart. And Parker Stewart and Marcus Carr both left the program. So I think they may have taken a step back, maybe, or they're still in neutral. Jared Wilson-Frame being your best player is not necessarily a good thing. He's one of the least efficient leading scorers on a team in the entire conference. He did play better down the stretch last year as far as shooting the ball from deep. So that may be encouraging. Maybe last year was an anomaly. But I think if Carr and Stewart would have stayed, I probably would have moved Pitt up to 14 or 13. But as of right now, I have him. I have him at number 15. I think 0-18 or 1-17 is certainly on the table.
Yeah,
But
they also have Malik Ellison coming in,
yes,
St.
St.
John's
John's.
transfer,
Yeah,
who don't call me crazy, but I think he could possibly be their best player this year. I think he's a pretty good piece to bring in.
yeah, I would agree. I'm actually sitting here looking at his name, and I haven't seen a whole lot of him. I'll admit that. I just what was he, 7 points a game at St. John's, something like that. But I think one of the biggest questions I have is I still don't know if Jeff Capel is a good in-game coach.
All right.
He can recruit. He can recruit anybody, but and I think he is the hire at Pitt that it went from a 5-year rebuild to a 3-year rebuild just by hiring Jeff Capel. He has Pitt in position with some of the best recruits in the country for the 2019 class, and if he can land himself a big man, Pitt could be back sooner rather than later. But admittedly, I don't know a whole lot about Malik Ellison, but I'll take your word for it.
All right. Yep. So, like you said, I think that's really the question. We know Jeff Capel is going to bring in talent. Can he put it together? We'll see. I think in the same type of situation at Memphis with Penny Hardaway, everybody's so excited about Hardaway coming in because he's bringing in all these great players. But can he coach them? We'll see. We're going to have to wait a little while to see too, because they're going to be pretty bad this year, as we said. So, I have them at 13. I have Wake Forest and Georgia Tech below. I guess you could mix and match and put any of those teams at the bottom. So
yeah, that's the bottom tier for sure. Yeah,
for sure. All right, so up next we're going to talk about Syracuse. I think Syracuse, as I said earlier, is kind of comparable to Florida State, where everybody's really high on Syracuse. I know you are. I think you have them at 4, correct?
That's correct.
Right. They're coming off a Sweet 16 run, but last year they finished 10th in the conference. They were a terrible road team. So I think, do they make a sizable jump this year? I'm not sure. I think they're definitely going to be better. I have them at 6. But again, they weren't good offensively. They weren't a good road team. They were not good efficiency wise. Good news is they pretty much bring back their whole club, and they add Elijah Hughes, who's a solid forward from ECU transfer. Jalen Carey is one of the higher rated point guards in this high school class. So that gives them some much needed depth, some extra firepower on the offensive end. Why are you so high on the Orange this year?
Biggest thing for me right now is I think eventually Carey will slide into the starting point guard role, which will move Howard to a wing and Battle to a wing. I am not a fan of Frank Howard being my point guard. He didn't make my top 25 returning players list. He's terribly inefficient, but at the same time, he was the only other option that Boeheim had last year. So his statistics were a product of volume. Now, he's a very good defender, and I think Elijah Hughes coming in is going to make Syracuse an even better defensive team. As far as Hughes is a kid out of ECU, 6'6", who is going to play on the wing. He brings good length. He's going to make Syracuse, that zone, even more impossible, which is still anchored by Chuck Wu. And hopefully Sidibe is back healthy this year. Carey's a score-first point guard, which he has the ability to distribute. I don't know if he really likes to. But taking the ball out of Frank Howard's hands, I think is going to be key. And I don't think there's any way that Jalen Carey could be less efficient than Frank Howard unless things go incredibly wrong. But I just think that letting Howard play off the ball, letting him pick his spots, I think Tyus Battle is a scoring machine, even though he's not really efficient. I think that Jalen Carey relieves some of that burden from Battle. He can pick his spots a little bit better, maybe get better shots, and you'll see his numbers maybe come down a little bit, but his efficiency go up. I think once again, they're going to be one of the best defensive teams in the conference, possibly in the country. But the offense can't look worse this year than it did last year when you have basically the same guys plus more talent coming in. So I think as far as talent goes on the perimeter, they're very good with Carey, Battle, and Howard. I also like, O'Shea Brissett he's an NBA guy. He's a lottery pick.
Right.
If he can just shoot the ball a little bit, he's gone. And I like Merrick Dolezaj as well as some good quality front court depth. I think he can be a good player for them.
He's my breakout guy in this roster. But you said it, Brissett, Battle, and Howard, as good as they are, they were all horribly inefficient last year.
Yeah.
They got to get better in the efficiency department, and they got to be a better perimeter shooting team. If they can get a little bit better on offense, I think that's going to make all the difference because we know they're going to play great defense. I thought outside of Virginia, they were the best defensive team in the conference last year, but just they're so dreadful on offense. So hopefully some of these new guys can boost them on the offensive end, and hopefully guys like Brissett, who are still young. Brissett's a really young player. Battle can finally show some efficiency on the offensive end of the floor.
Yeah. And like I said, they were just. I admittedly watched maybe less Syracuse games than anybody else in the conference last year because watching them play offense was so incredibly dreadful. It was just ridiculous. I couldn't do it. It was Howard shooting a three and then Battle shooting a three and then rinse and repeat. And if they missed, maybe Brissett gets an offensive rebound and flushes it home. But it was terrible. I thought, I don't know if Boeheim mailed it in last year or what happened, but it was terrible to watch Syracuse play offense last year.
Yes. So I have them at 6. You said you have them at 4, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
All right, so we'll see how the Orange do. Everybody's really excited up there. So, all right, so up next is Virginia. Obviously, the winner of the conference last year, 31 wins. So UAV, as we know, has had an incredible season. As I said, they won 31 games. They won the ACC regular season championship. They won the tournament championship, and then they suffer probably the most embarrassing loss in NCAA tournament history, losing to a 16 seed in UMBC. And again, the story that continues is Virginia can't get it done in March. And so focusing on this year's group, Tony Bennett has a great mix of guys. Again, postseason aside, UVA is one of the few clubs where I say they easily plug holes every year. Like they lose guys and they find guys. They lose guys, they find guys. These guys aren't going to wow you, but they're just so efficient on both ends of the floor. Now, the backcourt, Jerome, Guy, really, really good. But I think the difference maker this year, obviously, is going to be DeAndre Hunter, who is a legit lottery pick. Really dynamic player. I know he has some ups and downs with consistency last year, but he's going to be taking on a bigger role this year. I think he has a chance to be one of the better players in the conference. What do you think about Virginia? Do you think they can turn it around after last year's, disappointing end of the season?
Yeah, I don't. We talked about this with Florida State. We talked about this with Syracuse. I don't put a whole lot of stock in the recency bias, regardless of whether it was good or whether it was bad. I think, UMBC came out and shot the lights out in that game. I mean, sure. Virginia hadn't seen anything like that probably all season, but Virginia, I think it's bulletin board material for them. I mean, it has to be, right? If you're Kyle Guy, you've got to be sick about hearing this crap being talked about all the time. I think these guys come out with a chip on their shoulder. I really like you said, their big three. Another guy that I'm pretty high on is Mamadi Diakite. I think he's an athlete. He can come out, he can hit the glass. He may be able to slide into that Isaiah Wilkins slot. Obviously, he won't be nearly as effective out of the gate, but I think he has the upside to be able to be an effective four and be a help side defender for this pack line defense. And he's a guy that I really like. They didn't bring in a whole lot as far as freshmen go that I think anybody's going to be an immediate impact guy. As far as I know, the Braxton Key situation is still up in the air. He's still waiting on the results for his waiver application. If he gets eligible, this team becomes very scary, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, and it's not. They're going to win a ton of games. They're going to be in the mix for the ACC championship. It's all about the postseason with this team. I agree with you. You can't put a ton of stock into it. It was bound to happen sometime with a 16 beating a 1. It was going to happen. Happened last year. But can you imagine the pressure that's going to be on this team in the first game of their first tournament game next year? I think that's all anybody's going to be talking about. It's going to be Virginia and who they're playing, and that's going to be a tough thing to deal with. But again, Tony Bennett has pretty much accomplished everything you can there, except for a Final Four. I think he still needs that deep tournament run. to kind of solidify his time there. No, don't get me wrong. They've had some tournament success. They went to the Sweet 16 a couple of years ago. They did make it to an Elite Eight, but they've also got upset a few times. And I kind of compare it to Baylor. Okay, Baylor has got upset I think twice in the last like 3 or 4 years, but that's all everybody talks about. They don't talk about the 3 or 4 Sweet 16s they've been to. It's always the negative. But Tony Bennett, I think, really needs a deep run this year. What do you feel about that?
I think he may need it, but I'm not sure this is the team that gets it.
Okay.
I think people really underappreciate Devin Hall from last year. I thought that he was maybe their most important player. I thought that he would be more deserving of a first-team All ACC selection than Kyle Guy was. But going to your point as far as their first tournament game and getting hammered by the talking heads about what they're going to talk about, I absolutely agree. What I also would add to that is if you're Tony Bennett, you have to feel good that your backcourt is Ty Jerome and Kyle Guy and the types of kids that they are, because those kids are just straight killers. Ty Jerome plays with a chip on his shoulder, and Kyle Guy, we all know, plays with a big chip on his shoulder. So if it was a couple other guys, I might be worried. I think it's just going to piss these guys off, and they're just going to play that much harder. They might come out and just destroy teams all season, similar to what they did last year.
Yeah, I had them winning the conference. I mean, all the success they've had in the regular season, I think that's, where do you have them?
I have them at 3.
Okay, that's fair. I think Isaiah Wilkins is going to be a huge loss defensively.
Absolutely.
I think, I still think they're going to be great on defense, but still, he was their catalyst on that end of the floor, and he was their guy the last 2 years. I mean, he was so good on that on defense. So that concerns me a little bit, but I think DeAndre Hunter is going to be able to kind of, fit in that role, and he's so versatile. He can guard multiple spots. So that definitely helps the cause.
Yeah, Hunter's the best. He's the best offensive player in the high post against 2-3 zones in the entire country, in my opinion. And he's a one-man zone brister. It's incredible to watch him work that high post.
What are your projections for him offensively? What do you think he's going to average this year?
Stylistically, obviously Virginia handcuffs these kids.
Right.
I think he's probably, let's see, Wilkins. Well, Wilkins isn't really a good barometer. He's going to have to absorb some of the loss from Devin Hall because, like I said, they didn't really bring in any impact guys. But I think he is probably a 13-7, maybe. I think his rebounding numbers have to come up. My concern is I'm not sure how much 4 he's going to play. I think he might end up playing some 3 because he may have to slide into that vacancy left behind by Devin Hall. So I think he could be, a 12.5 and 6 guy, something like that. But, Kyle Guy is going to get 14 a game. I expect Ty Jerome to be at 13 a game. If DeAndre Hunter gets 12.5 a game, that puts him at 40. And then you sprinkle out the other 15 points amongst the rest of the team. So I think that's probably where he'll be.
All right. So we'll see what happens. Virginia, they're one of the programs that I really root for because I just want them to have success because Tony Bennett seems to be one of the few coaches that does it the right way. He seems like one of the few clean guys, if that's the way I want to say it.
Yeah, no, I agree, and he's easy to root for. He's not brash like Pitino, Calipari, Coach K, Boeheim.
For sure. All right, so we got a couple more teams we got to finish up here now with Virginia Tech. 21-12 last year, 10-8. Another first-round exit in the NCAA tournament, though. Back-to-back tournaments for Buzz Williams and the Hokies. So, like I said, 2 back-to-back successful seasons now, getting to the NCAA tournament. They have yet to win a game under Buzz Williams in March, but I think if they're going to do it, it's this year. Many think this is by far the best team that they've had since he arrived in Blacksburg. I like this group a lot. It's a very experienced group with a bunch of seniors, obviously led by, Justin Robinson and Chris Clark. And I think something that they've been missing the last few years that they might have this year is some depth. They're still a pretty small team. Kerry Blackshear hasn't had much help up front, but Kadeem Sy is back this year, correct? Or did he leave the team again?
No, he left the team again.
Oh my God. I swear to God, I can't keep up. I can't keep up. He's returned and left, I think, 3 times now. So again, I think they're going to have that issue up front. but I think they got a few extra players this year that can kind of contribute. What do you think about the Hokies?
I think they're in a lot of this a similar situation as they were last year. I think PJ Horn, who is a 6'6" power forward, is going to be the guy to back up Blackshear. You have to have Blackshear has to stay out of foul trouble this year.
Right.
Cy, he's not a great player, but it's one thing I talk about all the time is quality depth. And PJ played very well in spots last year, but he can't really, he's not going to be able to defend the block against a guy like Eli Thomas. It just Kerry Blackshear has to give up the stupid fouls. If he misses a layup, just go to the other end. Don't stand there and hack the guy that got the rebound. I hate when I see that. He does it all the time. He has to be on the court for them. As far as the rest of their team goes, they're absolutely loaded. I mean, Nickeil Alexander-Walker is one of my favorite players in the conference. Ahmed Hill is a guy who can score 20 on any given night. If he's feeling himself. Justin Robinson is one of my favorite players in the entire country. He's backed up by Wabisa Bide, Bide, I believe is how you say it, who is one of the best perimeter defenders in the conference. And they got a kid coming in named Landers Nolly, who is 6'7" and can shoot the hell out of the ball. And he's an athlete. He's just another guy that they're going to stick in the short corner who's going to drill threes all night. I agree that this is Buzz Williams' probably most talented as well as very experienced teams.
Yeah, Justin Robinson, I thought, was one of the best guards in the country in the second half of last year. He played so good down the stretch, and, he's a really talented kid. I thought he was great in the second half of the season.
Yeah, he's incredible to watch. I mean, he basically, put a team of 3-point shooters on his back and led them down the stretch. And, I thought that he was underappreciated by, most of the people outside the conference. The rest of the country didn't really know Justin Robinson. And I think coming into this year, he's amped for a huge senior season with all these weapons around him.
Absolutely. It was super efficient too, which I always like, 40% from three. I have them at finishing. Yeah, I have them finishing off. Of course. I have them finishing fourth.
I have them at 5. Yep.
Okay.
I think defense is going to be a problem here. It was last year as well. They're kind of a team without a country right now. They switch up defenses a little bit, and they don't really play any of them all that well. They have a problem defending the perimeter, and teams shoot very well from deep against them. I think this is a team that is going to outscore you rather than defend you.
Yeah, Nickeil Walker was really good last year as a freshman. I think he's going to be super duper this year.
Yes, yeah, I'm real high on this kid as well. Yep.
And the thing that I love about him is, as a freshman, he shot 45% from the floor and I think 40% from three. That's a great sign, especially from a young kid like him. Virginia Tech hasn't had a lot of success in basketball. So, I think what Buzz Williams has done so far, I think the fans have to be happy. I think they definitely would be happy with a little bit of a tournament run this year, maybe win at least a game or two. But I think they're capable.
I do too. I think they get a game this year in the tournament. Yep.
All righty. All right. So the final team we're going to talk about tonight is Wake Forest. Coming off another dismal year, they only won 11 games. They're 4-14 in ACC play. All right. Here's what I have: Danny Manning keeps losing and keeps recruiting. Yeah. I think you said it on Twitter the other day too. I mean, it's amazing. You even mentioned this, like I said the other day. So Manning this year, we're going into year 5. They've had one winning season. They did get to the tournament that year. They think they lost in the play-in game. Overall, since he's been there, 54-72, 20-52 in ACC play, and he continues to get top 100 kids. How does he keep doing this with losing so many ball games?
I have absolutely no idea. I don't have an answer for that question. And he did it again. He just signed another top 125 kid this week.
I know.
It's absolutely incredible. I don't know. Wake Forest is supposed to be a basketball school. I mean, it's not like they're Clemson where, as long as the football team's winning, nobody gives a shit what the basketball team's doing. But I don't understand. He's not any better than Buzdelek was. And if you mention Buzdelek's name in Winston-Salem, there's no end to the dirty looks that you get.
Right. So, looking at okay, go ahead. You wanted to finish? Sorry.
No, I just said that this team has some talent, but every team that he's had has some talent. So I don't know what to expect.
So really quick, looking at this year's group, they do have a bunch of production to replace. I believe they lost 3 double-digit scores, including Bryant Crawford, who was an All ACC guy. I really liked his game. He was really good for a few years with the Demon Deacons. So it looks like the key guys back are Shondae Brown and Brandon Childress. And how's this year's recruiting class looking? Anything impactful, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Jalen Horde is one of the best freshmen in the country.
Okay.
He's more than likely going to lead this team in scoring, I believe. You talk about Bryant Crawford last year. Bryant Crawford was a kid that I thought and predicted in preseason last year that he would go pro, and he did. But last year he was not very good. Just to watch him play, it was really strange. I expected him to take a step forward and potentially lead what I thought was a very good team. But coming into this year, they're going through kind of a rebuilding period, I guess you would say, obviously. But they have a kid named Jalen Horde, who's a 5-star kid, 6'8". He's kind of one of those hybrid forward type kids. He's a rim punishing guy. He's going to be awesome to watch on the break. I have him on my all freshman team. Another kid to watch out for is a 6'8" wing shooting guard type player named Isaiah Musius, he can score. I'm not sure how he's going to score. He's a little bit of everything. I think he has potential to be a 3-level scorer. And they have a point guard coming in named Jamie Lewis, who, he kind of got bumped down to a 3-star guy. He's 6'3", 190 out of the state of Georgia. He was a really good player as a freshman and sophomore in high school, but then he had some foot problems where I think he broke his foot twice. And it's kind of sidelined him and halted his progression as a player. If he can stay healthy, he's the point guard of the future for Wake Forest, and he could be a sneaky under-the-radar type guy.
All right. The only thing I can say is Danny Manning is a good recruiter, but he doesn't seem like he's a very good coach. I mean, what else can you really say?
No, that's my take as well.
If you look at the list of talent that he's had at the school, you would expect him to win a lot more games, and they just haven't done it.
Yeah, I'm a big Chaundi Brown fan. He's a top 40 kid. He come in with an ACC ready body, with an ACC ready game, and for whatever reason, it just didn't happen for him last year. He has a ton of potential and will be one of my players to watch as far as potential breakouts. He's on the cusp of potentially being great, but at the same time, I don't trust Danny Manning to coach him up at all or put him in position to be successful.
Yeah. I have Wake Forest at 13.
I also have him at 13.
All right, so that's going to wrap up the team previews. Tonight, we're going to finish up with just some rapid-fire questions here. So first up, Michael, who's your player of the year? I'm going with Luke May. That might be a boring pick, but to me, he's the best returning player in the conference. I also have Kai Bowman up there as well. If Boston College wins, exceeds expectations, but I think May's the guy you got to go with. Who's your pick?
Yeah, I also have Luke May. It's I looked for a reason to pick somebody else, but like you told me off air, if he is, then he is. I mean, if he's the guy, then he's the guy, and I think it's fairly obvious that he's the guy. So he might not be the sexiest pick, but I think he's probably the most likely to win the award.
I agree. And coach of the year, you could pick so many different guys. I'm going to go with Tony Bennett. Another vanilla pick, but another guy I wanted to mention obviously is Kevin Keats. I think if NC State can creep up into the, and maybe surprise people again, I think his name will be in the mix. Who are you going with for coach of the year?
I just wanted to say real quick, this coach of the year stuff it always boggles me. It's similar to the LeBron James situation in the NBA. There's never any reason why LeBron James shouldn't win the MVP award every single year, but for some reason, somebody else always seems to win it. Coach K should probably win Coach of the Year every single year in the ACC, but he actually hasn't won it since '99 and 2000, which is absolutely astonishing to me. And that's just my little rant. I want to get that out of the way. And of course, after I say that, I don't have Coach K winning it this year. I actually have Buzz Williams winning it this year.
You know, it's a media thing too. You know, guys vote for guys who, you know,
Yeah.
it's always some type of deal like that. So, newcomer of the year, you could go so many different ways. I'm going to go with Nazir Little because I think he's going to impact the game on both ends of the floor more than any other, freshman in the conference. So, I'm going with Little. Who are you going with?
I got RJ Barrett. I'm going chalk on that one.
Okay,
I
that's
would
fine.
like to pick Little. I think, like I said before, I think Little is in a situation where he's going to get 13-6, and then potentially be the number one pick in the draft based on upside. I think Barrett is going to be put in a situation where the ball's in his hands a lot. He's going to be able to put up some serious numbers.
Alrighty, and for breakout player, I'm going with Trent Forrest. I think he's a pretty trendy pick. Also, I'm going to stick with Anthony Lawrence. See if he can finally put it together this year. Hopefully he does, but I feel better with the Forrest pick. What are you going with?
Oh, you know who I'm going with, right? I'm going with Jordan Nwora all day. I think
Of course.
I think he's I think he's a household name by the end of the season. I just like his upside. I think it's awesome.
Is he your national player of the year too?
He's not my national player of the year. He's just second team all ACC. No, I'm just.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap up the ACC preview. Mychal, do you have anything you want to promote or anything before we head off tonight?
I just wanted to say thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And to any of your listeners who are looking for a good source for ACC news, I try to have a little bit of fun on ACC Basketball Report. I try to have guests as much as possible. Tony's been on. Will Ogenin, who's a buddy of mine through Twitter, has been on, and we try to have fun with it. Try to keep it light, and try to entertain as much as I can. So check me out, ACC Basketball Report. And check out my content, accbasketballreport.com.
Also, Mychal's Twitter handle is @Peacone36. That's PEACONE 36. So definitely check him out. Very knowledgeable guy, great guy to talk to. Mychal, I really appreciate you joining tonight, and we'll definitely have you back for a weekly recap this year.
Sounds great, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, no problem. All right, well, thank you for joining everybody tonight. It's just great to be back, great to be talking college hoops. So we will be back on Wednesday with an SEC preview. Blake Lovell from southeasthoops.com will join me, and then we'll be back the following Sunday for a Mountain West preview. So looking forward to all that, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.